As the Roaring Twenties were drawing to an end, so too was an era of relative prosperity for many Americans. As early as 1926, the construction of new housing had decreased. Businesses had too much inventory and too few buyers. Nevertheless, an optimistic America wanted to believe that the good times would last forever, pointing to fortunes that were being made on the stock market. Even people with little money to spare wanted in on the action, and stockbrokers readily agreed to sell shares on margin, where they would lend citizens money to buy stock. These investors figured the stock's price was bound to go up and up, allowing them to pay back the stock's original price tenfold. The constantly rising price of stocks cast a spell over the nation. Noon-hour traffic stood still as people eagerly awaited news of their improved finances. Even distinguished Yale University economist Irving Fisher made a bold speculation.
The nation is marching along a permanently high plateau of prosperity.
But the simple fact was that the price paid for many stocks was unduly out of proportion to the actual profitability of the companies who issued them, creating the illusion of increased value. On October 29, 1929, reality finally caught up with the stock market, and what went up came crashing back down. Panicked investors sold 16 million shares in a single day, many for just pennies a share. Millions of other stocks went unsold entirely on that afternoon, known as Black Tuesday. In just a matter of hours, the stock prices took such a nosedive that any gains made over the previous year vanished. The market's collapse was the most distressing downturn in the history of the New York Stock Exchange. So distressing, in fact, a number of investors committed suicide rather than face financial ruin.
Okay. A lot of information in that little 2-minute video, guys. A couple things I want to comment on. First of all, right there at the end, they said increased number of suicides after the stock market crash. Well, you can go back and look at the records of suicides during that time period, and there were some people that killed themselves. But guys, in a city like New York, there's almost every day there's people that kill themselves. There was no great increase in the number of suicides as this video would have you believe. Okay. Secondly, they talked about looking at not so much the productivity of these companies that they were investing in, but they were looking at the prices of the stock, and they just kept going up. And so people were playing the numbers there. And that's really called speculation. Okay, stock market speculation. You remember what they called the people that went out to California looking for gold? Prospectors or speculators. Okay, they were speculating that they were going to make a bunch of money and find a bunch of gold. All right, well, good luck. The third thing is they mentioned in the video something called margin loans. Okay. Now, margin loans are really kind of crazy. So basically, you go to the bank and you say, hey, I'm going to invest in the stock market. I don't have as much money as I'd like to invest, so I'm going to borrow some money from you, and then I'll invest it. And when I make that money back, I'll pay you back with interest. Okay? So this would be akin to me going over to the dog track, okay, going down to Intrust Bank and telling Intrust Bank that, what's up? No, he's fine. We'll do some research or watch a video or something. Hope you feel better. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, I'm going down to Intrust Bank and I'm going to tell the banker and say, look, I know the number 6 dog in the 3rd race is a guaranteed winner. Okay? I only have 100, but I'd like to bet 1,000. Okay? So if you'll loan me $900, when I win, I'll pay you back tomorrow. Is the bank going to give you a loan? No. But they were given loans. As little as you put down 20%, they put down 80%. That was your margin, 20 to 80. I mean, absolutely crazy. Now, you can still have margin loans today, but they're regulated by the Federal Reserve, okay? But there was no regulation here. So banks were loaning out money to people to speculate in the stock market. So what happens when the market crashes? Are those people going to have money to pay back the banks? This is going to be a major problem for banks because those loans will never get paid back. I mean, not only are you going to lose your initial investment, you're going to lose your frickin', the loan you made. Okay, so very dangerous behavior on the part of Americans themselves and the banks, which is a lot what we saw, guys, in the 2000s leading up to the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, is that banks were loaning money to people to buy homes, and they were loaning people that were risky, that didn't have good credit, that didn't have a long history of having employment and ability to pay off debt. But the government was encouraging banks to do this so that people could achieve the American dream, that home ownership would rise. Okay? You can blame a lot of different people for this problem. You can blame the banks for predatory loaning practices, even though the government was telling them to do it. Okay? You can blame the people that didn't read the fine print, that took out more money than they could really pay back. And so what happens was, when you had adjustable interest rates, you have a monthly payment. If the interest rate goes up, your monthly payment goes up. And if you're just barely scraping by, you're not going to be able to pay your loan back. And so banks are stuck with all these houses because they have to foreclose on these people that can't pay their loans back. And this affected almost everybody in the country. We were pretty fortunate in Wichita. We didn't get hit too hard by the financial crisis there. Okay? All right, so what led to this? What led to these problems? All right? Well, this next slide shows you some of the fundamental problems. All right? Hoover was wrong when he said the economy was on solid ground. It wasn't. First of all, this is the last thing we finished with the last chapter, is worker output or production, 40%, wages up 20%, remember that, 26%, okay? But then you have this unequal distribution of wealth where the top 36 wealthiest families had a combined income of the bottom 12 million, okay? That bottom 12 million, we're averaging about $1,500 a year in income, while the cost of living was $2,000 a year. If you live under the cost of living, what do they call that? You're living in what? Poverty. Okay? You guys know about what percentage of the population today in the United States lives in poverty? It's about 1/6 of the U.S. population lives under the poverty level. Okay? Here you've got it's about 10%. There's about 120 million people, okay, in the United States in 1930. All right? So you got about 10% of the population living under the poverty level. When the market crashed, people that did have money in the market, that lost money, what are they going to start doing with what money they have left? Are they going to keep spending it, keep investing it, or are they going to hoard it? They're going to hoard it. So that right there, guys, is going to lead to more economic slowdown when the wealthy are scared to spend their money because they just lost a lot of money. So that's just going to make problems worse. Does that make sense? And then the middle class, that though you still might have had a job, okay, the middle class didn't have enough purchasing power to keep the economy going to buy all these products, and so more people are laid off. And so this thing just spirals downward, guys. Okay, it's awful. Now, other flaws that we've actually talked about, the war debts that we were forcing the Europeans to pay and the Germans were having to pay to the Europeans. Remember the 33 billion, the 9 billion, remember that? You better, because it's on the test, okay? More workers are laid off. You got the tariffs that you've got a situation where Europeans can't sell goods here, so they can't buy our goods, and then they put tariffs on our stuff. which slows down trade. So then you have this situation here. This is almost as bad as margin loans, holding companies. Okay, let's say we owned a company called First Hour History. Okay, and you know, we were a growing business and things were going pretty well, and we wanted to make more money though. So we started issuing stock to Second Hour Government. Okay, so Second Hour Government started buying our stock. All right, so what did we do with the money they gave us? Did we reinvest it and expand our operations and grow, build new factories? No. We invested it in Ford and General Motors and U.S. Steel. We took the money they used for us and we bought other people's stock with it instead of growing our own company. That's crazy. Okay, so when the stock market tumbled like this, this money really just disappears. It never goes to anything that is going to expand or grow the economy. It's just a horrible idea. Okay, so these are some pretty bad flaws that are going on at this time period. And then the stock market itself. Okay, so the stock market itself, as we talked about, it's speculation, it's gambling, and so citizens were looking at the price of the stock, not at the actual value of the product, the national product, of the future of those businesses and so forth. Okay, so I think we'll do one more slide, and we'll wrap this up. Okay. All right. So what is Hoover going to do? Now I gave you guys a little bit of background on Hoover yesterday. Remember, self-made man, orphan child. Grows up to be this great engineer. They called him the great engineer, okay? And, he believes in the individual. And remember when I've been talking over the last couple of weeks about how small the federal government is at this point. Okay, what most people see is the federal government, the post office, the army, and so forth. You following me? Okay? All right, now, so Hoover, what is he going to do? He's going to call on cities, states, and charities to help those that are hungry, those that have lost their jobs. Now, one of the big problems and one of the tragedies of the Great Depression is homelessness. People's inability to pay their mortgage. Now, you're going to see this in the movie we watched, Cinderella Man. Okay, those of you who haven't seen this. You're going to see, at one point in this movie, the wife of the boxer, Jim Braddock, is going to go to his manager's house, or his apartment. It's a really nice apartment. There's no furniture in it. They've sold all the furniture so that they can pay the rent. Trying to keep up appearances, trying to keep a roof over their head. And you'll see that certainly with Jim Braddock, the boxer, who really struggles, has a family, and it's a great depiction of what life is like during the Depression. Okay? So, Hoover also brought in business leaders to the White House. What did he say to business leaders? Keep your wages up. If you keep your wages up, then people will still have purchasing power. They'll be able to keep a roof over their head. They'll be able to buy food. They'll be able to buy other things. That will help the economy continue to move. But we're worried about, we just want the economy to move. It's starting to get stagnant. Okay? Then they cut taxes. Remember, Mellon, with 2 L's. By 1924, they had cut the wealthy tax rate to 25%. So when you cut taxes, guys, you're not going to feel a real boom from that because they're already low. Okay, so you can't cut them to zero. The federal government won't have any money. So the approach that Hoover and Mellon take here is let businesses that can't compete liquidate. If you can't make money, we're not going to bail you out. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Have you not heard that before? Huh? Why didn't you say it? Why didn't any of you say it? Hey, follow me over here, dang it. I want to shame these students. Over here. Come on. Come on. Yeah, there they are. Thank you for participating. All right. You're going on YouTube. All right. Yeah. Purge the rottenness from the system. Now, guys, this is different than today. I'm making this connection from history to today, okay? Mellon and Hoover's approaches, if you can't make a dollar, then you can't stay in business. We're not going to bail you out. So let's go back to 2009. Okay? What happened to General Motors? Well, they were going to go bankrupt. Now, I don't know if you know this. Is Chrysler still around? Yes, they are. They've been bankrupt too. Okay? Is American Airlines still around? Yes, they've been bankrupt, I think, a couple of times. Okay, so when the president told us that if General Motors goes bankrupt, we're going to lose 25,000 jobs plus all those dealerships and everything else, we're talking about, tens of thousands of jobs that are going to be lost. Well, that's not true. Bankruptcy in this country doesn't mean you're necessarily going out of business. So the government spent $50 billion of our tax dollars, your and mine tax dollars, to bail out General Motors, which for a time we could refer to as government motors, okay? Because they bought up all this stock. Now, in the end, General Motors survived, okay, which it probably would have survived anyways. But if it didn't survive, are we still going to have demand for cars? So who's going to pick up the market share of General Motors if it goes out of business? Ford? Chrysler? Toyota? Okay, now, are those companies going to build more cars if General Motors goes out? Yeah. Did Ford need a bailout? So is it fair to Ford Motor Company that competes with General Motors that the government steps in with $50 billion of our tax dollars? Is that fair? So what if General Motors go out of business and Ford has to build more cars, they're going to need more workers. So we have a population of people that just lost their jobs that know how to build cars. Okay? AIG, which is a large conglomerate, owns many businesses, $85 billion. And then you go talk about the banks, what was called TARP. Okay, we are talking about hundreds of billions of dollars for the banks. Bank of America, Lehman Brothers went out of business. Now, Lehman Brothers went out of business, but Goldman Sachs, they didn't go out of business. They got bailed out. Well, why did Lehman Brothers not get bailed out and Goldman Sachs did get bailed out? Anybody have an answer for that? Because Goldman Sachs had more connections in Washington, D.C. They had friends in high places. Okay, this country used to be run from New York City and Wall Street. Today, the power of this country has shifted to Washington, D.C., to the political classes. Okay, you get this whole thing. The big debate is going on in Iowa right now over ethanol subsidies. That the government's going to spend billions of dollars. They're going to pass laws that first says you have to use ethanol. So the government passes a law saying you have to use it. And then it says, well, since you can't make money making ethanol, we're going to subsidize it and pay you to make this ethanol because we passed a law saying you have to use it. And they're going to use the taxpayers' people to do it. Now, where's the power? The power's in Washington, D.C. And I'm not sure, guys, you want it there. Okay? Because you're dealing with politicians. And politicians will do anything to get reelected. Donald Trump is doubling down on it. He said, I'm all for ethanol. And I'm going to increase the amount of ethanol that we have to use. Well, that's not conservatism, Donald. If you're interested in electing a conservative, that's not conservatism. Okay, true conservatives don't think that government should give anything to business. That's called corporate welfare. Okay, and if you can't make a buck, like Hoover said, too bad. After 9/11, the airline industry, okay, people were afraid to fly. In fact, the government grounded all aircraft for a few days after 9/11. It was eerie. I remember this. This is September, okay? I usually go out to the field when it's nice and work on the field, and we're in a flight pattern right here, right here, we get to the airport, right? You see it all the time. It was eerie. There were no planes flying. It's quiet. Okay, occasionally you see a military aircraft, and you're like, you know, it was pretty scary. I flew in January of 2002, just a few months after, and flew to Orlando. And, you know, people were scared. People were like, you know, checking everybody out, and I was doing the same thing. So the airline industry lost billions. So the government bailed them out. Okay? Now that's a little bit different than mismanaging General Motors and running it into the ground. But what does this tell big companies? This is the new term in America. Too big to fail. So, what's the message to big business? You can run your companies, mismanage them, run them into the ground, destroy their profitability, and guess what? Since you're too big, we're going to come in with the American tax dollars and bail you out. Yeah. Okay. So let's learn from history. Now, this didn't work either. Okay. So you can see here, this is just you know, a line of people waiting to get some food here. So here's what Hoover's willing to do. Okay. He created the Federal Farm Board, the Agricultural Marketing Bill of 1929, and this was to loan. And every time you see Hoover here, okay, he is willing to loan you money if you need help. But he's not going to give you something for nothing. Okay? He'll loan it to you if you need help, but not going to give you something for nothing. And this is the legacy of Herbert Hoover. Okay? This is where our whole ideology of government is going to change after Hoover when we go to Roosevelt. Okay? So they loaned $500 million to help farmers market their crops. That means after they grow them, sell them. Okay? The goal is to keep farm prices steady. And it ended up being is that the government ended up buying huge amounts of crops. And they couldn't keep prices up. And you can see this. 1931, a bushel of wheat went from $1 a bushel to 61 cents a bushel. Even worse, cotton farmers went from 16 cents a pound to 6 cents a pound. More than half. So this is devastating for farmers. All right? And then, you know, we're going to get the Dust Bowl as well. And, you know, we'll get into all that. Okay? Then Hoover asked for a limited revision on the textile tariff. Now, this is confusing. I'll explain this to you again before the test. But a limited revision on the textile tariff. All right? What are textiles? Clothing, linens, this sort of thing. So we wanted to raise the tariff on textiles coming in from overseas. Instead, Congress comes back with something called the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act. Hawley-Smoot? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Have you guys seen that movie? Ferris Bueller's Day Off? You know the teacher in the movie? Ben Stein? You guys know Ben Stein? Ben Stein's Money? No? Laura, you're struggling. You're hanging in there. Yeah, her eyes are just, I mean, she looks like she's ready to crash. Ben Stein is an actor. He's that guy that does the dry eyes commercials. He's got that really dry voice. How many people know what I'm talking about? Who I'm talking about? Okay, 2 people. I might as well not tell the story. Okay, Ben Stein is an actor, but he's also a Harvard-educated economist, okay? And he used to have this show on Comedy Central called Win Ben Stein's Money, okay? If you could beat him, you could win his money, all right? Anyhow, really bright guy. He's an actor. They hired him for this job to be the teacher in this movie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, okay? And so he's up there talking, and they said, just talk about something in history. So of all things, he talks about the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act. All right? And it's very important, but not many people know what it is. So here it is, 1930. This is just after the stock market crash. The Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act. Hoover asked just for a little revision On the textile tariff, Congress comes back with tariffs on thousands of different items. So as I said earlier, we're going to have tariffs, we're going to double down on them, and now we're going to triple down on tariffs. And we've already shown the relationship that it has with trade. Well, this is going to cut trade in half. U.S. imports and exports within 17 months are cut in half. Okay? So it has a devastating effect on American exports, including our food that we export. Okay? So Hawley Smoot turns out to be a really bad piece of legislation. All right? All right. So when we pick back up, we're going to talk about bank failures, and I've given you some insight as to why the banks are going to fail, margin loans, and then people aren't going to be able to pay back their mortgages and so forth, okay? So we'll get into that. We got just a few minutes left, and tomorrow we're going to start Cinderella Man. Peace.